Redditors who have gone or were declared missing, what is your story? My cousin went missing, called the cops, gave a statement, and suddenly he appears. Everyone was very happy but still confused. Turns out he fell asleep under the sofa. I was a teen and ran away from home and was missing for a few weeks. Left my small town due to small town problem going on and was basically road tripping with a friend. I was 8 and on vacation. Decided to go for a walk without telling anyone. Played all afternoon in the beach. Came at night. Oh boy, was everyone mad. You reminded me of my cousin. Suddenly, he disappeared, and everyone was frantically looking for him. Then he comes back a couple of hours later. Turns out he went to the convenience store without telling anyone. Bought food and candy, then stayed behind the house to eat so that no one can see him and he doesn't have to share. I ran away from home due to my alcoholic stepmom. My dad would always file a missing person report, and cops would eventually find me and bring me home. At 15, I was homeless for 6 months, and selling acid for food and a place to stay was still better than dealing with my stepmom. She drank herself to death and I found peace. Ran away from a residential treatment center that wasn't giving me the care I needed and was threatening to send me to another residential treatment center. Famous for their abusive tactics, I ended up being driven to a hospital by the police. After they talked with the staff at the residential treatment center I ran from, even they didn't think I should go to the infamously abusive one. Later on, the abusive one closed down. I was on vacation for 3 weeks. In the second week, my boss called me and asked if everything is okay because the police called them and told them that I was declared missing. My neighbor called the police because he didn't hear me for over a week and was worried about me. Was kind of a good feeling. Edit. Wow, my most upvoted post is about me who was just drunk for 3 weeks and got declared missing. Thank you guys. About 6 years ago, I hit a really nasty bottom in my addiction, alcohol. I decided to end it and broke contact with everyone as I drank myself to death. When my family found the room I was staying in, it was covered in blood. I was throwing up blood, and the police suspected that I had killed myself and gone somewhere to die. In the meantime, in some state, I had crawled into the road, covered in blood, and was taken to the ICU for a week until they put the pieces together and notified my family. Fun times. Note, 5 years plus sober and a lot better now. My cousin was kidnapped when he was very young, maybe 4 or 5. My aunt was living in Belgium at the time. He was kidnapped and thrown in a car, witnessed by many people. Police were called. My poor aunt was frantic. He was left at the side of a road about 8 hours later, but to this day they never found out who took him, where they took him to, and what happened to him while he was gone. It's a taboo subject that I could never bring up to my aunt. My favorite story is from when my cousin was 4 and we're on the beach with our whole family. At one moment, he just disappeared. We searched for him for hours and called the police. Turns out, he went to a random hotel that was 2 minutes away from the beach to poop, met a bunch of kids in the hotel and played with them, and everyone just thought he was a guest there. He even had dinner because the buffet had just been served. We almost sent a diving team to see if he drowned. When I was 5, my mom left my cousin and I in the car to run into gas station. This was back in the 80s, I should add. My mom's car had those back seats that folded down from inside the car. So I had a great idea to scare my mom. So my cousin and I climbed in the back and closed the seat. It was about 10 minutes later and no mom. So we popped out with smiles and saw a cop car and mom crying. I was never allowed to stay in the car alone again after that. Not me, but a friend's ex. I know how it sounds. This girl was involved in a pretty bad abusive relationship. She tried to leave and suddenly disappeared. Months had passed and people began to assume the worst. Eventually, she managed to escape her kidnapper and return home. The details are scarce, unfortunately, but it's best for her sake. My friend received a friend request from her on Facebook shortly after her return. She's now missing an eye in a neck brace, and her head is bald and scarred from brain surgery. Poor girl was beaten so badly. My auntie was missing for 15 years. She stopped answering calls, moved house and changed her number. I grew from age 3 to 18. I had 2 younger siblings she didn't know existed. One afternoon, I answered the phone at my parents' house. My mom had never changed our phone number. I've already moved out, but I'm visiting my dog. My family are away for the day. It's this aunt. I recognizes her voice from her reading me bedtime stories. She sounds so similar to my mum. I'm naturally freaking out about keeping her on the line, getting contact information, where she lives now, etc. Long story short, it's been 9 years. She is medicated for her schizophrenia and happy to be back in the family. I went to rehab. I don't know why I didn't think to tell anyone, but I was a drug addict, so my brain was mush. My boyfriend, now ex, was the only person who knew. About a week in, I got called into the main office at the rehab and was told that my mother got a hold of them freaking out and telling them that I had been missing for a month. She was exaggerating, but they legally weren't allowed to tell her that I was there, so I had to call her to explain the situation. When I got out, I had messages from tons of people asking if I was alive, and found out even my old job was contacted. I found out that my best friend and my brother messaged my boyfriend, and he ignored them and never told me that they contacted him. If he had, I would have told him to tell them where I was, and the whole thing could have been avoided. I felt really bad about the whole situation because it stressed a lot of people out. I can relate. My mother was also bipolar, and I'm convinced also had histrionic personality disorder. The description of it that I read could have been written about her personally. When I was in college, about 60 miles from where they lived, she called me in the middle of the week and demanded I come home for a turkey dinner. She was obviously in a manic phase, and I wouldn't have gone even if I hadn't had class and work the next day. The main reason I'd wanted an off-campus apartment was to get away from that. The next time I went back to their apartment, I discovered she'd thrown away most of the possessions I'd left there. I was still dependent on them financially, so had to keep in touch. But that and other incidents had killed my relationship with them, and I cut ties as soon as I could. I took my 3 children and did a flit to get away from their father, who had attempted to kill me in front of them. I drove around 150 miles away. We were given a room in a woman's refuge in a coastal town. While the processing papers went through, the children asked to go to the beach. Even though it was November and cold, they were happily making sandcastles when I noticed a photographer. He kept directing the camera towards us, but casually tracked away when I looked up. I was worried that the photos could give away our location, so went to speak to him, but I couldn't catch up, so left it. I found out later that I had been reported as missing and a danger to the children by their father. We did not stay in the refugee, long as I never felt completely safe there after that. Not very eventful, but I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade when we had taken a family trip to Las Vegas. We had spent a lot of the hot day in Circus exploring the arcade, rides, and tomfoolery they had going on. But at night, we went out to explore, no clue where. There was some kind of crazy light show. This white awning above a walking path filled with people, music, and all of these neat lights and lasers flashing around, being cast onto the covering. I think I stared at the lights too long and tried to keep following my parents without really looking where I was going. By the time I looked for them, they were nowhere in sight. Suddenly, the music was scary, too loud, and I couldn't listen for my parents when I called out for them. The crowd instantly seemed thicker, and the lights almost distorted what I saw. It all seemed so disorienting. I started crying because I lost my parents, and they weren't answering when I called out for them. A man came up to me in a uniform, maybe security or police, and was very kind to the tiny, terrified human and helped me look for them. I'm sure this whole endeavor wasn't very long, but it felt like an eternity. We eventually found them. He tapped my mom on the shoulder and said something like, "I think you may have lost this." She responded with an "oh" and carried on. And that is my story. The story of how I went missing is also one of my first memories. When I was 5, I went on holiday with my family to Scotland. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but land, dominated by trees. There wasn't much to do, so my sister and I played hide and seek. I thought it would be a great idea to hide right next to the front door of the cottage we were staying in, inside of a giant bush. I watched my sister look for me for about 5 minutes until she clearly gave up and went inside. However, I never give up on anything and decided to stay until I was found. After a short period, 15 minutes or so, more people started playing the game. I now watched my parents sprint around in front of me while I silently giggled in the bush, thinking I'm so good at this game. More and more people started to play, other holiday goers in cottages nearby, park rangers and police. I stayed in that bush for hours and hours until it got dark, having the time of my life. My sister was only 7, so she didn't help look for me and just sat by the doorstep. As it got darker outside, my yellow jacket got brighter, and after a whole day of searching for me in the nearby woods, my sister realized I was stood right next to her. Best game of hide and seek ever. Teach them a code phrase like "Ollie Ollie Oxenfree" that means "come out now. The game is over, you've won." And how important it is they come out at that point, because it's no longer a game, and hiding when not playing a game is unsafe. Do not ever abuse this code phrase by calling it out, and then being a bad person by saying, "found you." This is a safety phrase, not part of the game. Practice it from time to time by giving up, even when you know where they are, so they don't forget how it works. I had a mental breakdown in 2015 after losing a job, after having a hard year, so I packed a bag, got on my motorbike and rode to a party spot, Gold Coast. I got out enough cash to hold me over for a week and turned off my mobile before I left town. I spent a whole week just hitting the beach, partying, hitting bars, clubs. I stayed at a backpacker hostel and hung out with random backpackers. Overall, it was an amazing and refreshing week. I left to ride back home. Just before the Great Dividing Range, I got pulled over by the cops. Turns out my 2 co-workers I saw after I got fired were worried, so they came by my house just to check up on me. My housemates then didn't see me for a few days after being told that I'd been fired. So they searched town, reported me to the cops as missing. I had a known history of depression, suicidal tendencies. The cops searched through my records. No mobile phone activity, no social media activity, no contact with family members. So it turns out, while I was off trying to just escape my bad life for a week, everyone thought I'd killed myself or something. My license plate number was flagged, so when I went past the highway patrol, it must have come up on their computer to pull me over. The cop was actually quite nice. He mainly just wanted to know I was okay. He called in and had me removed as a missing person. In Australia, once you're listed as a missing person, you have to be cited and verified by a police officer to be removed. I got home 8 hours later to a lot of worried people. I honestly thought no one will care. If I knew it was going to cause so much trouble, I would have at least left a note. Someone who cares doesn't necessarily have to be a person who's in your life 24/7 or knows a lot about you. It can be difficult to figure out who you can ask for help, but there are people who are willing. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe.